We'd today we're going to study about the book of Ruth, the holiday of the holiday of Shavuot. And as we study about the book of Ruth and the holiday of Shavuot, I want to tell a story from today's Daf Yomi because it actually intersects with the book of Ruth and also the holiday of Shavuot. The book of Ruth begins with the story. The first verse in the book of Ruth is Vayhi b'mei Shvot HaShoftim, and it was in the days of the judges, and there was a famine in the land, and a man went from Beit Lechem Yehuda Gur b'Snei Moav, hu v'ishto u'shnei banav. He and his wife and his sons went from the fields went from Beit Lechem Yehuda to dwell in the fields of Moab. Okay, so that's how the verse begins. But right away, this verse reminds us of another verse, where also this verse takes place also during the time of the judges, and it's referred to in the Daf Yomi today. This verse talks about, the verse that it reminds us of is the verse that starts the chapter, probably the lowest point in Jewish history, which is the story of the Pilegesh Gibeah, the concubine of Gibeah. And that's the story that begins that there was a concubine married to a Levite, and she ran away from him and she went to her father's home, and he went to get this concubine from Beit Lechem Yehuda. He went to bring her back to the mountains of Ephraim. So it's the same idea, the same places. That here it's Ephrat, which is perhaps reminds us of the mountains of Ephraim, the way it's spelled. But also here they left Beit Lechem Yehuda, and also the story of the concubine of Gibeah is he goes to the concubine of Gibeah. He goes to get her from Beit Lechem Yehuda, and then he travels back with her, and then all these problems happen in the story of the concubine of Gibeah. So the stories are almost, in essence, both taking place when people are leaving Beit Lechem Yehuda. Beit Lechem Yehuda symbolizes Torah, symbolizes the Melucha, the kingship, the Beit HaMikdash. It symbolizes the path. So in the concubine of Gibeah and also in the story of the book of Ruth, they both have left from the center and gone out. And in Benjamin, in the story in Judges, they go into the tribes of Benjamin, which is almost in essence worse than these fields of Moab are here. Let me just summarize the story from Judges 19 through 21. The story is that he's walking back with his concubine, and he comes to the town of Gibeah, and nobody is willing to welcome him in. He's out there on the street. Finally, one person welcomes him into their home with the concubine. People surround the house. The concubine is thrown out to the crowd. They assault her all night. The Levite wakes up in the morning, finds his concubine either dead or almost dead on the threshold, and he takes her, and he's horrified. So he cuts up her body into pieces, sends her around to all the tribes, and says, "Look what these people of this town of Gibeah did." And then after they do that, the tribes are horrified. They say to Benjamin, "Hand over the people from this tribe. We're going to punish them." Benjamin claims it's their jurisdiction. They don't want to do that. A civil war occurs, and the tribe of Benjamin is almost entirely wiped out, except for a few hundred men, who then they have to kidnap the other men the other tribe's daughters in order to marry back in, because there was an oath against marrying them. That's the story of this concubine of Gibeah. In many ways, the book of Ruth is the opposite of the story, because in the concubine of Gibeah, everybody does the wrong thing. And the story of the book of Judges happened, the story of the concubine of Gibeah, the beginning of the story and the end of the story is very clear that it only happens because there's no king in the land of Israel who can restore unity and the rule of law. Comes to the book of Ruth. Book of Ruth leads us to a kingdom. It's from Ruth's actions that we get a king. And so Ruth is in many ways the opposite. Also, the book of Ruth is all about kindness. Everybody in this book, all the people from the death of Elimelech and from the death of Elimelech, who's married to Naomi, from his death and his two sons, from that point on, everybody is demonstrating tremendous kindness to Ruth, to Naomi. And so therefore, this book is in many ways the opposite of the concubine of Gibeah. So that's the background to the text that appears in today's Talmud. The rabbis in today's Talmud and today's Daf Yomi in Gittin, Vav Beis tell us that the verse states that his concubine went astray. But Tiznah of Pelag show that the concubine, Tiznah usually means adultery. She committed adultery, but it really here means that she did something against him. She left from being with her husband, not a real husband, because she's just a concubine, but she did something against him. But she left him and she went to her father's house, which was in Beit Lechem Yehuda. And she stayed there for a period of time. Yamim, which can mean, even though it translates usually as days, Yamim can mean years and 4 months. Or it can mean she was there for 4 months. And that also reminds us of what it says in the book of Ruth, that she stayed there in the fields of Moab for around 10 years. Meaning to say, here this woman, this concubine, she's going back to her father's home. This could, of course, be a metaphor for the Jewish people. We had been living as a concubine with a man, not as a real wife, but as a concubine with these idols, and we turned back to our father's home, to Beit Lechem Yehuda. We turned back to be with our God, our Father in heaven, and we were there for a period of time. The question the rabbis discuss in the Talmud is, what was the nature of the reason why she left her husband, and she did something that was adulterous, and then she had to leave her husband and go back to her father's home. The rabbis assume it's not actual adultery because, first of all, then he wouldn't be able to bring her back by Jewish law. So what did she do? Matiznah of Pilag show. Rabbi Evyatar taught that the husband found a fly on her, Zvuv Matzova. And Rabbi Yonatan said that he found a hair on her. Okay, so we were trying to understand the nature of her mistake, or the nature of her objectionable behavior. Either it had to do with a fly, or it had to do with a hair. So Rabbi Evyatar found Elijah the prophet. And he says to Elijah, what is God doing right now? My ka'avid kudshabrichu. What is God doing right now? We all want to know that question. What's God doing? So the answer is, what was God doing right now? Elijah said he's studying this story of the concubine of Gibeah. That's what God's doing at this moment. At this moment, he's studying the story of the concubine of Gibeah. Just so happens to be. Isn't it too much of a coincidence? Just so happens to be that the very passage that they're studying, that they're debating, Rabbi Evyatar and Rabbi Yonasan, is exactly what God's studying at that moment. We'll come back to that. Remind me, that's the crucial point. So he said, okay, Rabbi Evyatar said, okay, that's what God's studying there. doing right now is he's studying this passage from the book of Judges, chapter 19 through 21. And well, what's God saying? What does God say? He says, this is what Elijah says, this is what God's saying. Abiathar, my son, says that the husband found the fly. And Yonatan, my son, says that he found the hair. And God was offering both explanations of the incident, as though, like, there are two opinions. God was reviewing it. He says, okay, what did he find? He either found the fly or he found a hair, as though both could be right. Abiathar said, God forbid, chas v'shalom. How can you say this? Can God be in a doubt? We have a doubt over the question. We have a doubt as to what God actually found, as to what her mistake was and what the husband found. But God doesn't have a doubt. God knows exactly what happened. So Elijah said, the phrase which appears only one other time in the Talmud is such an important phrase as we come upon the holiday of Shavuot. The phrase is, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. These and these are the words of the living God. Meaning to say, you, Abiathar, who says it's a fly, and you, Rabbi Yonasan, who says it's a hair, you're both correct. You're both correct. So he says that Zvuv Matzah, that initially the husband found the fly, and he didn't get upset. But the hair pushed him over the top. When he found the hair, that pushed him over the top. So that's what happened. He found the hair and pushed him over the top. What is the significance of the fly in the hair? So Rabbi Yehuda taught that it was a fly in the chicken soup bowl. It was a fly in the soup, and the hair has to do with the genitalia. That the hair was found in a place where they found it to be dangerous for the man, or alternatively, that the fly represented an accident. And a fly could end up in anybody's soup bowl. It could just fly in when you're not noticing. But the hair there means she wasn't wearing a hairnet. So that was her negligence. So that's why they were so upset. But what's the significance of this Gemara? I mean, what is the meaning behind this concept that God was walking, that Abiathar, Rabbi Abiathar finds Elijah, and he says, what's God doing? And of all things, God is studying this passage of the Pilegesh Gibeah. What's the significance of this? This, of all things God has to study, this is what God has to study? And what is the meaning of the fact that God is studying this passage of the Torah? It seems very difficult to understand. So let me see, first of all, if anybody has any suggested answers before I give you the answer that I'm going to suggest. Anybody have any suggested answers? Okay, nobody has an answer. Okay, so I'm sure everybody has an answer, but everybody's waiting to hear mine, even though I want to hear yours. So the answer that I heard in the name of Rechaim Volozhin is as follows. The point is, okay, Morris, hold on one second. Morris was going to say an answer, and then I'll tell you mine. Yes. So the question is, why is Hashem studying the passage that they're studying? And the answer is very simple. Hashem was studying whatever passage we're studying. Whatever passage we're studying from the Torah, Hashem will be studying that passage. Meaning to say, our act of Torah study is a partnership with the divine. When we study Torah, we're awakening the spiritual forces in heaven, and for God's attention is enveloping that act of Torah study. So when they see Elijah the prophet and they said to him, what's God doing now? God is having this conversation with you. God is studying with you this passage from the Torah. And that's the concept of what Torah study is. Torah study is a conversation with Hashem. And Hashem is having this conversation with us. So that's what Shavuos is. Shavuos is an opportunity to study this conversation, to have this conversation with God. Shavuos is an opportunity to have this conversation with Hashem. That's the first idea I wanted to share with everybody today. Okay, hold on one second. Oh my God.